in 2016. We had a memo yesterday about the number of theatres we have in the city, which is a bit of a glut. And I remain concerned about the state of this industry and the reliance on public money. It's possibly a discussion for another day, but there is a glut of live seats in the city already. This item is confirming a previous decision to support the restoration of the building itself, not about its use as a theatre venue. The complex includes an ugly wall panel on Queen Street, which did support a cupola of historic merit, which fell off, which has rather ruined the historic thing, and I think you'll find Noel will support that. I don't want us to reapprove a bunch of money with an expectation that we keep giving more to run a venue. That's not fair to ratepayers across the region. So before we start, I have some Chair's recommendations which have been circulated to you all and printed and up there in red for those in the room for you to consider ahead of the debate, but I'd like to give you some context as to why we've got here with these recommendations. As I'm sure most of you are aware, I haven't been a huge fan of this project. I continue to have reservations about the potential costs associated to the ongoing build, particularly with the future operational costs of running the venue. If you look outside the window here, you'll see a Midtown precinct in disarray. We have a myriad of issues playing out right in front of us. Major safety issues plague both sides of this site, particularly antisocial behaviour and lack of accessibility. I've heard from a number of residents and visitors who don't feel safe here at night, people who now actively avoid the area. Then we have multiple commercial spaces either empty or languishing, or commercial tenants don't generate quality interactions or outcomes, and it probably have an impact on Smith & Co.'s. I'm sure that these issues are all related to the ugly, empty construction site we are discussing today at the heart of this precinct. While I wouldn't have supported the original decision to commit public funds to St James, I'm clear that the best chance we have to make a real difference to our Midtown right now, is where it is to get on with it. We can no longer accept the eyesore it has become and must make the best use of a difficult situation. A priority must be cleaning up Queen Street frontage and making it safer for residents and visitors. I've expressed this to the owner, expect the staff to do everything they can to expedite the work, and that includes the change to the historical nature of that ugly former supporter of the cupola that fell off. We must also send a clear signal that no further ratepayer money will be committed to either build or to the future operations of the theatre. As I've discussed with the owner, there must be a real commitment to finding an operator who has the best possible chance of making this commercially viable. Similarly, if we confirm our contribution to the project, the government must see through its promise to match this funding. So the additional Chair's recommendations in front of you highlight these issues and help to strengthen our position to see the revitalisation of our mid-city immediately and to be good stewards of public money. I'd like to acknowledge the dogged advocacy of Councillor Lee and the Centre Advisory Panel, the Waitemata Local Board and Auckland Central's MPs Chloe Swarbrick. Reluctantly, I'll move this. Or Councillor Lee, would you like to second this?
I'm certainly happy to second the recommendations as in the report. That's A, B and C. I have some concerns with some aspects of the additional wording, but I do note they're actually notes. I'm quite happy to note things, but I have to say I'd like to have had some discussion with you before in regard to some of those extra things.
Fair enough. We've got them up there anyhow, so you'll go with that and then we can talk about it.
Happy to suggest a change, but perhaps offline or... Thank you.
Okay. Well, so you're going to second it or not? You can third it if you like, and I'll find someone else to second it.
I'll second it if you want.
I'm happy to second it on the basis that the recommendations are the key decision points here. Thank you. In A, B and C. Thank you.
Well, no, you can't do that. I'll have Councillor Hills will second the whole bloody lot, and then we can have a discussion about it that way. Okay. I'll try over to you, Noel, sorry. And I think you'll be able to talk us through some of the historical aspects of this.
Thank you, Chair and councillors. Members, I wonder if I think I'll be very brief after that. I think you've covered the broader issues. Just to remind the councillors that in 2016, there was a resolution to commit $15 million of funding towards the restoration of the theatre. There have been changes since then, both in the context, and the Mayor's outlined some of those, and the technical mechanisms we were going to use to enforce those resolutions. The big change is that from 2016, it was anticipated that the theatre restoration would proceed alongside the apartment development. Now, this is no longer the case for the reasons articulated in the report. The report addresses those changes and identifies the broader risks related to this project, some of which the Mayor has identified, without taking a first principles review of the 2016 resolution. The report's recommendation is that you reconfirm the $15 million funding and that you note that the mechanism to deal with many of the issues that have been raised are through a milestone payment method. The final point I would make is that on Monday night I attended the City Centre Advisory Panel meeting, and they have provided some views which I understand have been circulated to you. It's fair to say there was a broad range of views identified, but those ones that have been provided to you are what was agreed. I'm happy to take any questions. I have the council's legal team with me at the back if I need any help on legal questions. And I recommend that we table those documents that I have handed out to you. It's this document here. That was lucky. Sorry, Councillor Watson.
That's what happened to the bit on top of the of the tower they've kept.
I fell into that, didn't I?
Getting a bit excited there, no?
It's this document.
fell to pieces.
Fell to pieces.
Righto, tabling a document. Deputy Mayor Simpson has a question.
I do, Mayor, and I think you've got to a really good place on this, so thank you. My question probably is to you, though. It's around point 8, and that is the government's contribution, agreed contribution in 2023 for 15 million towards the theatre restoration project. Have you had any recent discussions with the Minister or the Ministry for Culture and Heritage as to their ongoing support for the restoration?
Is that you? I think it's you, Noel, of you. And
Yes, I have had recent discussions, as at yesterday, with the Ministry of Culture and Heritage officers, and subject to this council resolving this afternoon, they will then take a report to their chief executive, who's been delegated the approval to sign off the $15 million from government. So at this stage, without committing government, everything's still on track.
Yeah, I think.
Thanks. Sorry.
Carry on.
No, I was going to thanks for that. I don't need to speak later, but I'm in support. Thank you.
Okay. We've got to just make sure that we're not just handing over money that's not until it's been spent, and then we're going to.
So our funding is conditional on the government's funding.
Plus,
yeah, that's what I was kind of saying.
Plus, yeah.
That's what my question was.
Yeah, no, very well. Plus, it's also when you've got to do the work and then we fund it rather than the other way around.
That's the milestone payment method. Yes, that's correct.
And I think Councillor Darby raised the questions earlier in the day about open booking here, and I'm very keen on that. I mean, I want to know that when the guy says he spent 15 million, that he can demonstrate that he has spent 15 million. Because I went in there recently and had a look around. It looked like Gaza inside. And,
No, Gaza's words.
was that?
So just on that, Chair, the milestone payment method addresses that. Before any payments are made of the public money, the owner has to demonstrate that the money has been spent for the purposes of the milestone, and that there is also sufficient money left at each milestone payment to complete the project. So there is full transparency from that perspective.
Councillor Filipina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one question to you, and that's with H. You've mentioned the governing body, which you are part of, and the other words, I'm just asking that they be removed. So then the governing body is the whole 21 of us. I'm just a wee bit worried that if and or means just go to you. Personally, no disrespect, but I agree with that, the governing body which you are part of. So I just asked that request, Mr. Mayor.
I think I'll take out the or. Okay, so the governing body,
Yeah.
the mayor.
Thank you.
But I accept you, it wasn't a trick. I didn't actually write that little bit, but we'll take out or. Thank you,
Okay. Thanks.
Councillor. Councillor Darby.
Thanks. So just following on from the Mayor's comment and my comment earlier, you may not have been here, but can we assume that in the funding agreement, we're not discussing that detail today, that it will be an expectation that the private partner operates in an open book manner?
Absolutely.
And particularly, the report mentions that there's $15 million of capital already expended by the developer. I'm hoping that extends, that open book approach applies to that $15 million that has been spent as well.
We've been in discussions with the owner regarding that issue, and the owners are more than willing to establish to council satisfaction the money that has already been spent on their behalf to date, and we will get that peer reviewed by our own QS.
That draws me to the focus on the QS. I read that in the report, and it wasn't clear to me that whose QS that is. That is our QS.
That is our QS.
Okay, good. And the last part is the last part of my questions relate to time, and there's expectation from the two public partners here, Crown and ourselves, that the project actually starts, that is not a site that languishes, a blight on the streetscape in the Midtown as it is. So there's expectation in that funding agreement that we see some certainty in contracts being let. Is that correct?
There is an end date where the project has to be completed by, and that will drive everything backwards, to describe it. When it starts is to some extent in the owner's hands when he can get the contracts written, but there is an expectation that we're moving at pace.
So in arriving at the end date, is there being some project management input into looking at the end date, if that date is sort of helping determine a start date?
Yes, there has been some, in establishing, we've got a draft set of milestones that will need to be finalised. In establishing those milestones, we started, I'm not sure if we started, but we had an end date, and the milestones were to deliver at that end date. That was done 3 to 4 months ago.
Okay, look, the last one, we ran into the hurdle of it being coupled to the residential or the development on the north side before. So we're absolutely confident that is those two projects, a residential development in St. James rebuild, restoration, they are decoupled entirely. They are not reliant in any way. We're not likely to hear later on, once the money's all committed, that suddenly they've joined up again or become reliant on each other.
I can't answer that, whether they're, and what happens in the future. As the current state is that they are uncoupled, notwithstanding that the the theatre owner has a covenant on the apartment block securing the conditions of the original resource consent that relate to the theatre. So to some extent, it will be coupled in that respect until such time as the apartment development is finished. But for all other intents and purposes, they are two separate projects. Notwithstanding that, some of the chair's recs will require the apartment owner and the theatre owner to come to an arrangement, and that will be a milestone the council will impose.
Oh, there is one more question. You know, I've seen both Crown and ourselves make grants, and we never ever take up position in like a stake, a long-term stake. Are there any commercial unit title bill parts of this development, or you know, I'm thinking for our $15 million, is there something that's commercially viable that we might express an interest in, given that we're
In the theatre?
Yeah, well, look, there are, I don't know the design, are there any commercial elements that face the street that we could take a unit title in, for example?
That what will face the street is mostly the apartment development. The theatre,
Okay.
the only frontage to the theatre, to the Queen Street from the theatre, is that tower.
Okay, leave it there, thanks.
Councillor Walker.
A couple of quick questions. One that you can probably answer, Noel, but it just goes to the mid-city area, and that is it correct that the City Rail station in the vicinity will be the busiest public transport node in New Zealand, with a significant amount of pedestrian and other traffic associated with it? It's a no-brainer. I just want an answer.
Well, as he knows, he's a historical
I will use
person.
it.
Okay, the other question I've got just goes to funding into the future, and somebody else might answer it. But given that we have a facility that, as a theatre, will effectively be a civic facility, it'll be enjoyed by the public. Is it conceivable that we could levy some development contributions from the vicinity to assist in the funding of this? I mean, we haven't done that at this point, but can we? Or could we?
Development contributions will apply to the apartment development.
Correct?
I'm uncertain, sorry, councillor, whether that applies to the theatre.
Okay, but in a situation where you've got a facility that meets the sorts of funding criteria for other facilities that we use development contributions, I would have thought that that could be an additional funding tool that takes us off the hook a little bit.
Okay, well, that's a suggestion that the management can consider. On the other hand, it's such a shithole at the moment that you might have to bend over backwards to get someone to build something there, because it is a real negative to the city, that dreadful empty site.
I'll reserve my right to speak.
And the graffiti on it, and it's just horrible. Nevertheless, Councillor Lee probably sees something positive in it, but thank you, Wayne Walker, for that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can
By
I
the way,
just
a question or comment, because if you're going to comment, I'll delay you, but
okay, question? Okay. One to Noel and one to you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of the tower, can you confirm the tower is outside the direct scope of the development funding agreement?
At this stage, yes.
Okay. And can you confirm that the developer with the owner of the tower property are working together to try and get some progress extra to what's been signed off in terms of restoring the tower.
That is correct. We have been in discussions with the theatre owner and via him the apartment owner, and they have accepted a milestone in the agreement to address the Heritage Tower / Queen Street frontage issue that the Mayor has identified.
Can you confirm that the restoration of the tower, which is owned by the apartment owners or block owners, or the apartment to be one day, sooner rather than later, hopefully, that the restoration of the tower is part of the resource consent?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so my next question is to the Mayor. I was asked when I came in this morning whether I'd second the Mayor's recommendation. I said I'm very happy to second the Mayor's recommendations, but I assumed they were the same as A, B and C. However, there's extra recommendations there, or notes, and by and large I completely agree with them. But in terms of the tower, given the restoration of the tower is a resource consent condition on the owner of that property, sending a signal that the removal of the tower or the restoration of the tower, for a decisive leader like yourself, Mr. Mayor, we don't want to be like the grand old Duke of York, marching the men up the hill and then down again, and taking the tower down and putting it up again. I would ask you to remove that, the removal of the Heritage Tower. That could cause confusion. That's my only request.
Well, the bit of the Heritage Tower removed itself by gravity some time ago, and all that's left there now is this really ugly support to it. And even our Noel, who is our expert on that rather than on development contributions, does agree that what's there now has got zero charm whatsoever. And so it's been removed. The tower, the top of the tower is removed by gravity. So it's not a restoration. It would be a rebuilding of a new tower. It's nuts. And that whole ugly rusting steel crapper there is one of the reasons why we've got this ugly, dreadful area left. No.
So,
You asked me.
to cut through this, I'm confident that with these resolutions, we can arrive at a solution to the Queen Street frontage issue. What I'm mindful of is that we shouldn't prescribe the method to achieve that, and that's why I acknowledge the note in your recommendation, because we've been in discussions with the owner and they are committed to addressing those Queen Street frontage issues. How that happens is yet to be worked through. If it's a resource consent, it's 3 months. If it's restoration, it might be quicker. But we'll tie that up with a milestone in the agreement process.
There you go. Councillor Baker has a question.
Yeah, so just first one's in regard to the resource consent that you talk about. So I know in the report it talks about the resource consent for the apartment building, which has been, lapsed or it's been pulled. But is there an existing consent for the work for which we are going to be funding? And if so, how long has it been going? And is there any risk of it lapsing if it hasn't been given effect to?
There is a consent for the theatre restoration and it's still operative. The one of the conditions is on the theatre is that the tower is retained, hence the Mayor's issues.
So how long, given that consents, if they're not given effect to lapse after 5 years, how close are we to that happening?
I'd be guessing, but I would guess we're within the 5 years still.
Okay.
And you could argue that work has been done to give effect to that consent? Because a lot of the demolition has occurred.
I mean, all I'm asking for is I want to make sure that we've got all of those ducks lined up and we don't suddenly go, oh, well, I've got to apply for a new consent, and then suddenly we're wrapped up in a big quagmire of stuff. My second one is potentially for Bram in terms of paragraph 68 talks about what council could do if the developer or the person responsible sort of bails out or ceases to exist or whatever, and it talks about what we could do. What will we do? Because it's a big chunk of public money, and I just don't see anything there at the moment that sort of gives me real confidence that actually we've got some real protections here, because there is risk. And so what protections do we actually have as opposed to what we could do, which is what's in the report?
So we potentially would have a mortgage over the property which we could make a claim on. I mean, the end result is we could end up owning the theatre. And
Another one.
And I know, I didn't think that would fill you with confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I just,
Told it once about 30 years ago.
It just worries me, though. I mean, there'll be other people who will have mortgages. And so where do we sit in the queue? And what protections do we have for public money? Because we make people who we give grants to, or we lend to little community groups, and we make them jump through hoops. And that's for, 60, few tens of thousands of dollars. It's 15 million bucks of ratepayer money.
In the interest of silence, the attachments say that we'll hold a first mortgage over the property.
Bram has come to save me from that question.
We might speak too soon. Look, in any development funding arrangement, whether it's for a public good thing or commercial, your principal controls are making sure you're not advancing the money faster than it's actually turning into value in the project. So the milestone framework and the payment in arrears, and there's fairly substantial verification and information processes, project steering group and so forth around that, pretty much as you can put into something like this. The paper's pretty clear that there's always some risks, but the point is, at least as we're applying funding through in accordance with the milestone payment, that money is hitting the ground. If the worst comes to worst, then yes, there are some recourse options, secured by caveats, mortgages and so on. But of course, in the real world, no one who's funding or financing a project ever wants to be in the position where they have to exercise those options. And we have sort of similar legal recourse built into all sorts of things. But yeah, of course, your best protection is to at least keep the project going well at the front end.
Councillor Furley.
Kia ora, thanks Chair, and thanks team for that. Yeah, I share the concerns that a lot of councillors have expressed around the table, and I'm just following on from what Councillor Darby was saying about trying to look at what other benefits we might be able to get for the 15 million ratepayer dollars that we're putting in. And this might be premature, but is it possible to put some conditions in there, for example, to allow for community access, or to give community groups a discount if they were to hire the theatre once it's finished? Or is this too early in the piece for those sorts of conditions?
No, Councillor, we have secured conditions that require the owner to provide a number of opportunities for council and government to carry out events. I think it's 2 a year. And those can be determined at the council's leisure, and there is no charge for those events. 2 a year.
Excellent, thank you. Kia ora.
Got one in mind, have you? Councillor Watson.
Yeah, just being one of the hillbillies from the outer extremities of the Auckland city area, I just wanted to be sure, and I've had a little look at the old pictures of the St James, what we're dealing with here in terms of the Queen Street frontage, because obviously that's where most people go up and down Queen Street. So if we're talking about investment of public money, the appearance from Queen Street, I would have thought was absolutely paramount. So when I look at the photograph from the 30s and 40s, you see a very elaborate exterior facade and this beautiful pinnacle tower of the St. James, which I guess is in line with a couple of other very prominent buildings, you know, like the Civic and like this wonderful building, the Town Hall. It says that the facade and tower were hidden by the addition of metal sheeting in order to modernise the appearance of the building for the visit of Queen Elizabeth in 1953. And then you see in the 70s, and then you see the 80s and 90s with that cover. So the very simple question I've got is that beautiful facade and tower that's evident in the early photos, is that intact still behind that sheet metal covering that was put over it in the 1950s initially?
Significant elements of it, yes. But as the Mayor has said, some have disappeared over time through natural attrition and just in terms of the work that's gone on in relation to the overlay facade that was put over the tower.
Yeah.
So the resource consent condition requires that it be restored, be retained and restored to the original condition.
Okay, so that's in the resource consent, and obviously that's what you'd want for Aucklanders walking down Queen Street. You want to see as close as you can get to what was there originally, because that's a stunning visual sight. I mean, I think anything less than that would undercut the restoration as a whole, certainly from the outside. That would seem to be self-evident.
I think that is a fair point. I think that tower was prominent because it was a tall building in that area at that time. It's not going to be like that going forward. So there may need to be some consideration of what is the best solution for that tower going forward, with an emphasis on either retention or reinstatement.
Yeah.
So, yes.
So I guess when we look at the kind of site plan that's in the agenda, which I assume most people are aware of, you know, with the way the St. James goes, you know, the main bulk of it is on Lawn Street, which, you know, I guess people go to the library. But again, Queen Street is our main street. Even back as it was built originally, that was obviously the focus was, you know, the facade and the tower from Queen Street. So I think what you've said has answered my question. And I guess the only other obvious thing is there with that covering, how have people been able to get in to actually see what's there? Like what do they do to establish the condition of that facade? How did they do that?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. I didn't attend the site.
Okay.
But they would have had a lot of PPE gear, I would suggest.
Yeah. Okay. So So I just say to other councillors, if you go and look at these photographs, which by the sounds of things will be intact to a greater or lesser extent, that's obviously the jewel in the crown as far as the public appearance of this building goes, and for a lot of people that will be what they see is the outside, and then of course there's the wonders of it when you get inside, but in terms of that public aesthetic, that's obviously crucial. Thanks.
I'll interrupt you. I've got to move for an extension of time, unfortunately. Okay, all those in favour? Against? Me? Carried, unfortunately. We've now got Deputy Mayor Simpson has a question.
Thanks, Mayor. I just am referring to attachment E, page 337, which is the Working Party's recommendation from March 2024. And it says cost to complete budget tracking will be completed by the owner and certified by council's independent QS on a monthly basis or as required. My question is relating to H, which you've got governing body still in the mayor, which doesn't really matter. But how often are we going to get this reporting? Is it going to be on a monthly basis, or is it going to be less or less often than that? And don't you think we should probably put some timeliness in that reporting? I'd hate it to go sort of pear-shaped and then we know at the wrong time. You know, like, I would hate us to know too late, for want of a better word. That's my first question.
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, I know that sounds a bit thing, but quite often in these sort of projects which I get involved in, outside being the mayor, they actually put timely in there, because often things don't happen for quite a while due to either permits or something or other else. And then all of a sudden it rockets off and it becomes something you have to see very regularly, and then it settles down. I've been in there and had a look. There's been quite a lot of work done there at the moment. If you go in there, you'll be quite shocked, and not in a pleasant way. And so probably monthly would be the furthest apart you'd want, even if it was just Noel saying nothing's happened. But once it gets going,
I agree. So would you be happy adding monthly?
Yeah.
Would be, so note the future reporting on the project will be provided directly to the governing body on a monthly basis. And as you say, if there's nothing there, say nothing. But I would hate it to go longer than that.
Well, I agree with that. Once it gets going into the tricky parts, as much as I dislike that project, I'll go in there once a month myself, because it's deeply difficult engineering at the moment, and I've had some experience with old buildings and the tricks associated with them, or the dangers, risks and otherwise. So that's fair enough. We've adapted your thing into the H already.
Thank you. And my second question is just to clarify on what is our security on this? You know, we're putting up 15 million. And it's, again, a working party recommendation that we'll hold first mortgage over the property. And my question is around, as a first mortgage holder, are we the only first mortgage holder? So we will therefore potentially, if it all went pear-shaped, we would be the owner. Or would we just get our 15 million back?
I'm not sure if Noel's got an answer to that one, because the developer will be borrowing against this promise of this 15 million from somebody else. If it all goes pear-shaped well before it's finished, then we'll own a nice site there and we can knock the whole bloody thing down and get more than $15 million back. So that's all.
That's what I was getting to, actually. Yeah.
Hopefully it doesn't.
Okay. Correct. But I just wanted to have that confirmation. Graham, is that correct?
So
Consequences
right,
set out in the report.
And there isn't any current mortgage.
Right, and no current mortgage, yeah.
So we're the first mortgagee over the property, if we think that's necessary. And my understanding is there's no other mortgage on the property.
Yet.
Well, I think it is necessary. That's my personal view. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it was always assumed that we'd take a mortgage over this. It is a loan that has conditions that save it being paid back if certain milestones are achieved. So we do have some security over there. It's not I have to say, this is a situation where we're getting ourselves out of a bad situation. I never would have voted to get into this, but we are where we are. And I think this is the best way out. Okay, I've got no more questions. I know I've got a question from Councillor Turner.
Just on the back of your comment, Mr Mayor, so what are the triggers and when do we release the mortgage debenture if we forgive the loan?
So, as I understand it, we would release all those obligations on the completion of phase 1 to our satisfaction.
All right, thank you. You can retire, gentlemen. Thank you for coming on, Noel, and putting up with questions that have stretched your historic experience and powers. I'm going to see whether I've got three people are going to have a debate on these things, and we'll start with Councillor Walker. 4 people.
Sandra, would you be able
It's
to
not compulsory. We're
put up that,
any more than 4, 5, 6.
Sandra, would you be able to put up that picture I emailed you?
Eh?
I emailed Sandra, the lady just next to you, a picture. There it is.
Yes,
So,
glorious.
first of all, councillors, you have a picture in front of you which goes to the iconic structure at the front, which is quite narrow, which was the entrance to the St James Theatre Tower. The purpose of that entrance was to be an entrance because the theatre itself is located to the back. So if you don't have something commanding at the front, you don't know that the theatre is there. If we had another picture that looked at the landscape in the vicinity, we have a number of features like this, one of which is the town hall where we are now, another one of which is the civic building, which also has a tower, another one of which is the art gallery up on the hill, which has a tower and a bell tower, and so on. And if you actually stand in the landscape in the vicinity of the Aotea Square, which we own, you see all of these structures. They form a relationship that is incredibly important to the civic presence of this part of the city, which once was the very soul of the city, and I would suggest in the future, particularly with the very busy City Rail Link station, will once again be the heart and soul of this city. So this particular structure at the front is very important. It's quite modest. I would suggest the costs of fixing it in respect of the overall cost of the project are very small. And it associates with Queen Street. The Queen visited this building. Other notable people have also done so. So there's every reason to retain it because of its presence. And I would suggest it would be hugely popular to Aucklanders. So I would urge the Mayor to take out that particular part that you've got in the motion that you want to put, Mr. Mayor, because I think, as Councillor Lee has indicated, the retention of this tower is part and parcel of the resource consent and so on. It should stay. The other comment that I'd make is that part H, I think, which goes to funding, in my opinion, should be taken out. We shouldn't preclude other sources of funding that might be put to this project. And that clause effectively does that. So I think we're stabbing ourselves in the foot there, Mr. Mayor, and I would suggest that, the gracious man you are, you might well take that out as well. So I'll leave that to you.
Thank you very much for that, but you will look at the right-hand side there that the attractive bit on top is missing, and the bit that's left is just a vertical piece of concrete across and back down again without any lateral support. It's particularly ugly. That particular ugly thing on the right is why nothing's happened on the site so far and why it has gone from the soul of the city to the arsehole of the city. And
in response, sir, I would suggest that structure could be replaced. I would suggest that if there was a need to raise funds on the part of Aucklanders, I'd certainly put my hand up, just in the way this structure that we're in now was funded by public subscription. So Aucklanders do care for their city. Well, they do care about heritage and history, and this is an implicit part of it.
Well, it was until it fell off. But if you think it's not very expensive, you're welcome to offer to fund it yourself, but I think you might find it's quite difficult. The other part is that since this all kicked off, the ownership is separated between the site at the back and the bit owned by the hopeful apartment developer, and so that there isn't an automatic entry across the site. It's a separate site now, so.
But that's being revisited, and yes, I think it is part of the entry, and I think you'll find that that's part of the covenant, Mr. Mayor.
Well, it
Mr.
doesn't preclude
Matson,
that.
can you confirm that?
What we've got up there doesn't preclude
Yeah,
those
can
things happening.
Point of order, we're doing ping pong debate here. It's,
Sorry.
yeah.
We've heard that. Thank you very much indeed. Morris Williamson will offer a probably not supportive statement to that.
He's entitled.
Yeah, I've got a number of questions that I'm not going to ask of the officials, but just to put to councillors to think about. I mean, the first question I think is, have we got a shortage of seats in the city for functions? Because I hear the Q Theatre coming along desperately needing funding because they can't. And there are plenty of others. I'd list them if you wanted me to. Sky City are about to launch at some point, I don't know when, a convention centre with a flood of more seats. And so the first thing is, if you've got 15 million and there are people in the city hurting like hell for lack of facilities, there's a place out in Flatbush where the school doesn't even have a footpath in front of it for the kids to walk safely, you go straight onto the road. Is this where you'd spend your first 15 million? Yes. That's my first question to you. The second thing I'd want to say is the arts and culture and heritage community in this city, as far as I ever have anything to do with them, are absolutely loaded with dough. Loaded. The people I've been to functions and they've got more money than I'll ever see in my lifetime. If this is so important to the art and culture and heritage community, why are some of them not stumping up with some more of their money and not asking the poor people of parts of Auckland who will never be in this building ever and ever use it, we're going to make you pay a higher level of rates in order to fund something you'll never use because some people want it. The next one I want to talk about is these things have a life of their own. And I'm lucky enough to have recorded in the minutes of the caucus of National Party, the city rail link that you're telling us is 2 billion will never be. It'll be at least double, if not treble. And I'm pleased I did that because that's what it's turning out to be. And I want to hear way better answers what happens when this turns to custard and rolls on down the track and they are more than 15 million needed in order to, or you leave the eyesore. And so I'm really concerned about that. What confidence does any of you have around this table that the owners of that place who have done such a bad job to where it is right now will actually complete this on time and within budget? What confidence do you have of that? The next thing I think is if we put a mortgage around any of these properties, why the hell did we not put a mortgage on the Civic Administration building? Why did we not put a mortgage on that so that when it turned to custard, we would have at least got some money back? We got nothing back from it. Excuse me, Mr. Lee, I'll have my say. And how's to know that what is finally in the end planned and designed won't end up being more what we call the gold-plated end and not necessary, and we end up having to fund more in order to complete it? We've got a massive big eyesore sitting at the bottom of at the bottom of the city right now called Seascape. It was supposed to open in 2021, then 2023, then 2024, and now it's not even got anything going on. Will we end up having to come in and help build that as well? Seriously, you need to think about this. We have to take I'm like a pork chop in a Jewish synagogue here. You guys all don't agree with me. But I'm really concerned about this. Now, we have no option now because we've given a commitment in the past of 15 million, so it's locked and loaded. But I would like to know that a blowtorch of accountability goes on to the people involved in this project, and this doesn't just end up being a big elastic band that keeps flowing on, and it comes back to us, and guess what happens? It comes back to us with, oh, look, we really have no choice but to put some more money into this because it's really too hard, and we get that again and again. And so, CRL, does that ring a bell to you? Because that's what's happened there.
This is not CRL.
So, I know it's not CRL, for God's sake, I can tell the difference between a bloody train track and a building. But for goodness sake, just think about that principle and think about what we lock in here. For me, I'm going to have my vote recorded against this whole resolution. I know I'll be the only one on there, but all I can say is I would really like to take account of what this money is being spent on, what it could be done to help some people in various communities, and why there aren't other people out there in the arts, culture and heritage that could be putting quite a lot more support in. It's wonderful to want to support these things, beautiful, But how about stepping up with some funds and some dollars for it as well? I'll leave it at that.
Sorry, Christine Fletcher wants approval to do electronic attendance. So I'll move that she can, and it'll be seconded by Councillor Hills. All those in favour, please say aye. Okay, we'll just plug her in. Sorry about that, didn't mean to stop you mid-flight there. Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, I want to thank you for bringing this item to the governing body. A little bit late in my view, but you've brought it to the governing body and it's a matter of high interest, so thank you for that. I also want to thank you for putting focus on the Queen Street frontage and even the tower, though you've heard my previous comments about the mixed message we could be sending about the tower in that note of yours. I want to also thank the St James Working Party members, Mr Andrew Crookzina, well-known developer and builder and restorer of heritage buildings, a builder of the Metropolis, which should be listed, I reckon, as a heritage building. His expertise was invaluable, and of course, Mr George Farrant, who should need no introduction as a long-term heritage manager for Auckland City Council, and also in this council for many years, an expert heritage consultant. So I want to thank them. I think they added real value. It wasn't really, I think in the recommendation it's called a political working party, but we never saw ourselves as that. I was able to handpick those two people, and our focus was essentially on what our job, which you yourself commissioned, Mr Mayor, was to review the business case and make recommendations, and that's what we did. And we were mindful, given this is a complicated arrangement with a private owner and complexity in the ownership of the ground where the theatre stands or kind of stood. Thankfully, most of it is still intact. That we were mindful of the real possibility of cost blowouts. Cost blowouts in the public sector contracts, this council in particular, are all too frequent. You can look at the CRL for a classic case, but in terms of buildings, the Wellington Town Hall, the Christchurch Cathedral have turned into something of a nightmare because of poor governance and a lack of rigour. So that is why the Working Party recommended, and thankfully council management and the chief executive agreed, that the payments, the milestone payments, are paid out not on the basis of 3 months has gone past, here's another couple of million. We rejected that. The payments can only be made now on the basis of achievement of agreed construction attainments. So that's the first thing. That was the first change. And also on the basis of cost to complete, which the public sector never does nowadays. In other words, all too often councils and governments pay out a bunch of money and then they get the message a few months later, a few years later, oh, we're in the red, we need more money, and it comes as a shock. And so what we try to ensure is that there is complete visibility from the get-go about how much this is going to cost, and we get updates from a quantity surveyor, our own one, as the project progresses. So no unpleasant surprises. In addition to that, we insisted on having a mortgage, and people are asking about the mortgage. No one insisted on a mortgage for the civic administration building. And, you know, that was virtually given away for $3 million. In effect, in reality, we will be most unlikely ever to get a cent of that. So we tried to ensure that there's maximum protection, not only for public access, which is enabled in the covenant, but also on the money that the public sector, the council and the government are providing through us. And so we are determined that this project will be a success story for Auckland. And, you know, and we're doing it we're going about it in a different way. And I'm so glad that the council management and staff have agreed on the recommendations we made. In terms of the end use, that's yet to be decided. Councillor Williamson has talked about people in the suburbs, poor people. They're not going to be interested in this. I was a poor person in Auckland. We went to see the pictures at St. James, you know, because St. James appealed, what St. James could provide appealed to a broad spectrum of Aucklanders, and there's no reason why we can't ensure that those opportunities happen. Just one final comment, and we just hark back to that productivity deal we're dealing with the government. St. James was built in 1928 in 1 year. I won't say anything more. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
That's very good. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. And this is actually, for all that you're a little disappointed in me putting my hand up, this is actually the first contribution I've made to debate today. And I haven't even asked very many questions. So I feel I've been very well behaved. So I should get indulged a bit now if I'm a bit naughty. So on this, I'm agnostic about the tower aspect. I think there could be a way forward that includes it. There could be a way forward that doesn't, and the exact how. But what we're doing today is actually recommitting to something that we already said we were going to do, and moving that forward, providing some certainty to the people who are going to work on the next steps. And so I'm on board with that. I'd like to note that the City Centre Advisory Panel feedback, which Noel mentioned, is in supportive of continuing forward generally with this and finding some progress for that particular part of the city. I also received an email from Heart of the City and the City Centre Residents Group that they're supportive of us moving forward in this way. Maybe not the nitty-gritty details of what happens next, but certainly the overall intention, and that's great. What I wanted to mention is that for me, this site, I saw some music there, I saw some movies there. I don't know if I ever saw any theatre there. So for me, this is actually a venue that, although we call it the St. James Theatre, it's not strictly just a theatre in the way that, say, Q is. It has a role, particularly as a music venue, that at the moment we don't really have a venue like that, particularly since the King's Arms went. And the deal, as I understand it, is that our money is only to go to restoration of the theatre, that the intention for that restoration is that it isn't a gold-plated restoration, as has been mentioned, but is in fact aiming for a sort of a grunge theatre, I believe is the term, approach, to get things going and open again and to fill that particular niche in the venue market. So we might have plenty of seats, but we don't necessarily have plenty of seats that fit that niche. And this is a venue that can do that. I also wanted to note that one of the reasons, the main reason I asked for it to go to the City Centre Advisory Panel is because that is my bus stop. And it is the bus stop that serves all the buses that go up and down Dominion Road in and out of the city. So we get on there, we get off there if you're going all the way to the city. And it's terrible, that part of Queen Street, and has been for a long time. And while I understand that there's potentially more that can be done to make it a nicer spot, more welcoming, safer at night in particular, for bus users there, of whom there are thousands, that's unlikely to really get much progress until we provide a bit more certainty, which we're doing with this today. And so I want to be able to catch the bus in a nice spot, to be able to know that if one of my kids, a 14-year-old who catches the bus a lot, goes into the city a lot, that I don't need to worry about him catching the bus home from there at night as well. So that's one of my key motivations. And the reason I asked for it to go to the City Centre Advisory Panel was because I know that's something dear to their heart as well. And I'm hopeful that once we get this through today, that will provide the impetus for them to get really involved in how we reactivate that space and sort of fill that gap in terms of the tooth. We might need to fill it with something that's a bit temporary and exciting rather than going straight to a gold tooth, but how we fill that gap and make it a nicer space is really important for the regeneration of Midtown as well. Finally, the point was made that we don't necessarily get confidence out of this, that we will get the end result that we're seeking. Well, we definitely get no confidence at all if we pull out at this point in the process. We need to stay the course, and if we say no to this, and those who do vote no to this, they're providing more uncertainty and less confidence for a way forward. So I support these resolutions, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your compromise on this.
Councillor Turner, I've got a few people who wanted to have a yak about this,
So I'll be quick, Mr. Mayor. I will support this, but in saying that, I really support what Councillor Williamson said. But in his words, he said we're locked and loaded. In your words, Mr. Mayor, you said that if it all turned to custard, we could take a jackhammer to it and get our money back. I don't know how feasible that is, but I'd be really into it if it turns to custard. The one thing that plays on my mind is Auckland's a big, big place. And I just sit here thinking about the Glen Eden Playhouse Theatre. When I got involved with those people elected as local ward member, they were in real trouble. The council had turned off their $18,000 a year as a penalty for not talking to them properly. And those guys dug in, and now they're back up and running with some serious cash in the bank for that little organisation. And all we can do to thank them, we have restored the 18,000, but we allowed a development next door to be built 3 stories tall, 500 mils from their heritage building wall. How do you keep that in good order going forward? So I will support this, but it's a big place and we need to think of all of Auckland. Thanks.
with a bit of luck they'll fall down that bit. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, I won't be too long. I guess it's useful to put this in some sort of context. I know if you look at any of the Wikipedia sites or anything, it says that St James is one of the best preserved vaudeville theatres in the country. It's an important piece of cultural, natural heritage, and there's a chance it'll help regenerate, this part of the city, as people have been referring to. I guess it's also worthwhile reflecting that back in the 60s and 70s, there were quite a lot of people who wanted to demolish this place, the town hall. So, the wonderful building we're in today, it could have been gone. Fortunately, that council of that time spent 50 million, which would have been a lot of lolly back then, in 1998, strengthening and refurbishing the town hall, and it reopened in that year. It probably took a little bit longer than that. And now when you look at any of the flyovers or drone footage of Auckland on TV and adverts, the Auckland Town Hall always figures pretty prominently. So investments in our cultural heritage made at one point have the ability to reap advantage later on. And I think this will certainly be the case with the same with the St James. As far as as far as the people who are like agnostic about the facade and tower go, I think, it'd be useful if you had a look at some of these old photos. It'd be a little bit like restoring the Auckland Town Hall and not having the clock tower. That's really, that's a similar comparison, because that's essentially what these buildings like. That would, you think, if you look at this building now, you'd think, well, no clock tower, it loses quite a bit of its identity and its appeal. And there seems to be a little confusion here as to what's behind the facade, but when you look at the history, it says that this beautiful facade and clock tower were hidden by the metal sheeting. I think it's probably been quite difficult to see exactly what's there and what state it's in as Noel reference, but certainly in terms of that value for money or engagement with Auckland public as a whole, that Queen Street perspective is absolutely crucial. So to me, it's just a no-brainer that you look to preserve that in as pristine state as possible and as close as to its original. And it might well be a lot closer to that than we've been led to believe in some quarters, and I think that will be the case. So the resolution that goes to, the contradictory resolution that goes to removing, noting this option as a preference, certainly not my preference, or restoration of the Heritage Tower, have $1 each way on that one, but obviously the restoration of the Heritage Tower to the overall aesthetic of the building and the return on the investment is crucial. That's just common sense. So I guess without labouring that anymore, this is something that's been, I can remember some of the councillors who have been here a while went on that tour to the St James back in 2016 or whenever it was, and it was quite, it was an impressive site. We haven't been a city that have preserved our heritage all that well, really, if you think about it, and what there is of our heritage that does have some appeal and some individuality dates back to this time and this type of building. So thank you to all the people who have worked to get us to where we are today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your involvement on that, such as it is, but I think this is a day that people should be celebrating because it's a win for the heritage of Auckland. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fletcher, who's online somewhere.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I wish to speak briefly through you to Councillor Williamson's comments on this. I think he is right to raise caution in and around expenditure, but I want to give him the reassurance that this was always part of a coherent plan which involved an arts precinct and cultural heritage. If you go back to 2010 at the commencement of this Auckland Council, there had been a very carefully worked through arts precinct and cultural precinct that had been worked on by people like Liz Sybil, George Farrant, and Legacy Auckland City invested heavily in bringing the civic back to life. The town hall has already been mentioned. In Q Theatre. So it was always intended that St James be part of this precinct, which, is obviously the civic, Q Theatre, Aotea Centre, Town Hall. And so the preservation of the facade onto Queen Street was an important part of that. Along came a new council and there were some random suggestions. And as a former Minister of Arts and Culture, it really broke my heart to vote against the proposal for the Auckland Theatre Company down, the ASB Auckland Theatre Company down on the waterfront. Not because I didn't want a base for the Auckland Theatre Company, but because it wasn't part of a coherent plan. And we live with the problems today of that being ill-considered and being taken out of the planning that had led up to the arts precinct that had always been anticipated and invested heavily in by Auckland City ratepayers. So I think you have led us well through this situation, Your Worship. This seems to be a sensible solution, and I hope to all of those that are sitting around the table today that they can support it, because I think it's in the best interest of Auckland. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to acknowledge yourself, because I know that you weren't this keen on this 2 years ago. I remember you were going to meet with Chloe, so I just want to acknowledge Chloe for really pushing hard with this. But you discussed this with Max at the time, and Max and Jazz have helped you on this journey to keep it alive, even though it's been semi-reluctant from you. And I just want to acknowledge Steve as well and the team for keeping this going. I guess the issue is, if we don't do this, we just have this massive blot on the landscape in Midtown. We've got Te Waihoratu opening next year. We've got Convention Centre. Unfortunately, we've got Sky World here, which we don't really know what is going to happen with that building for a long time. And then you cross the road, you've got the St James. And it's just crucial for this area that we have this upgrade. We've got Precinct and the Chow brothers, Stonewood down the road, building some fantastic residential, and then we're going to still have this building sitting here it's been there like this for over 10 years now. The actual top that in those early pictures came down in the 50s, so I think we need to be honest about the tower itself. It will be built as a brand new thing. It's not protecting something that's there. It was gone 70 years ago. So I know that Steve and the team are keen to restore it if possible, but I think part of the issue is, if there's not options on the table, we may end up with that ugly, dark, dangerous frontage on Queen Street for a long time. So I think we just need to be a bit flexible to try and get some outcome for the city as quickly as possible. So this money's been sitting there for a long time. It would be silly to lose this and the government money. I'm sure there's lots of things we don't like. The East-West Link is going to be $3 or $4 billion, and we know that is not supported by the council, but is going to be built in the city, and we don't want that. So there's lots of things that work in other people's interests around the table, and I guess that's part of being a city. So this is a good way forward. Acknowledge everyone that's been a part of it. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. Deputy Mayor Simpson, please.
Thanks. I think I'll be real quick. This 15 million funding investment represents, from my perspective, a significant investment in performing arts infrastructure in Auckland. The St James has a long history of showcasing contemporary music, and we are a UNESCO City of Music. I think I agree with others in saying investment into the St James will return this particular part of Queen Street to a thriving cultural heritage and retail zone within the Aotea Arts Quarter. I would say one thing though. Developing a collaborative and collegial relationship between the operators of the theatre and other venue operators within the city will be important. So I think going forward, that's an important part to note. I commend your recommendations, Mayor, and happy to support. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. I'd love to support this, but I, like Councillor Williamson, I think that the building is in extremely poor condition. And it wasn't that long ago that it was reported that the floor was rotten and there was mushrooms growing through the floor, and well, there wasn't even a floor. And I'm just listening to what Councillor Lee was saying about we need to have a council quantity surveyor, have a look at the costings and everything like that. I think you really need to have an independent surveyor looking at it. And if it was to go ahead, if everybody supports it, you need to have a timeline, and we have to know there has to be a finite, because we just can't keep going on. I think Councillor Williamson was correct that we do have a lot of very wealthy people that live in our community that are art lovers, and why haven't they, there's been many, many years that they could have all been trying to fund to restore this building. We've got this part of town, we've got a lot of buildings that are already sort of on hold. We've got the Symphony building, which is, I don't know if any of you know what the Symphony building is, but that's the Bledisloe building. That now is on hold. It's owned by Malaysians, and I think they paid about $40 or $50 million for the building. They've got a long lease, but that's sort of, for them to do anything, it's blown over $600 million for them to do anything to that building, and that building's actually got really good bones. We all love heritage, and you know, I've personally out in Howick, Mr. Reardon will support what I'm saying. I helped to save a really beautiful heritage building out there, but we did get the funding and people put up the funding, but you know, we haven't really seen anybody coming out and saying that they're going to help fund this. And I mean, yes, we've put 15 million in and the government's putting their 15 million in, but where's the rest of the money? We don't know how much this is going to cost. If the symphony is going to be 600 million and that's a building with good bones, how much is this one going to cost? We had the big blow up with the CRL, you know, so, you know, some of you might have said that you might support it, but after listening to myself and Councillor Williamson and the Mayor and a few other people, you might reconsider. We do have to have a finite, and we just don't seem to have it. Thank you.
Councillor Darby, please.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I think I've asked and had my questions about, you know, making sure that our money is well spent there answered, and I'm satisfied. But look, we're actually talking about a classic piece of cultural infrastructure, absolutely classic. And I think I went to the last show before the building was closed, and I'm pretty sure it was the Nick Cave concert. It is a great bones building, this one. It might look like a relic at the moment, but it is one to be resuscitated. I was around Auckland, you know, Ponsonby was my ground when I was a student, and I used to go to His Majesty's Theatre for the Buckethead concerts. I remember seeing Split Ends before anybody knew about Split Ends at the Buckethead concerts, both at the Town Hall, at His Majesty's, and it was a thriving place. I mean, people used to rush to the city centre. And it was the cultural infrastructure of the city centre that attracted people in many respects, as well as the theatres, the movie houses that were here then. But of course, the His Majesty's Theatre disappeared almost overnight with a developer's wrecking ball. This one has been so close to that wrecking ball, not suggesting that any developer has wanted to put that through it. But look, we have a responsibility to bring these buildings back. They are classics. And you cannot compare this place to, say, the Sky City Theatre. Nick Cave is not going to head up to the Sky City Theatre and sing Red Right Hand. He ain't going to do it. It's not the place that many artists want to perform at. They want to perform at great venues. That's why you find artists going to the Royal Albert Hall and not the Arena in London, you know, the O2 Arena. It is these venues that attract people and attract artists. And I think, like, we will be looking back as to this day and making these decisions and thinking it was hard then, but look at the outcome of the life being brought to that building. So I think, we're on a good course here. We've quizzed our staff about how that $15 million can be protected. I want to acknowledge the governments, both the former Labor government and the current national government, for sticking to the course and committing to this their $15 million. That's great. If one of them reneged on that, like the current, would put us in a very difficult position. But thanks to the staff, thanks to Councillor Lee, Andrew Crooksina, George Farrant, good work. People really committed to making sure that we see some, a real lively future in this building. It will be an absolutely enriching, lively future. And it's something our city deserves. Good on us.
I've broken to a cheer then. Councillor Leone, please.
Okay, so thank you to staff again, acknowledge to the Mayor. Also want to acknowledge Nolene Buckland, the chairperson of the Auckland City Centre Residents Group. and Alan Matson, obviously you've already spoken earlier from the Waitemata Local Board. I just wanted to note that we should be prioritising our heritage and cultural buildings here in the city centre, but I also take on board the gold-plated projects comment. We don't want blowouts and absolutely hear that, but is that more about our own issue that we haven't developed strong enough KPIs around the structure on our contracts? So that's just something that I'm noting down is, you know, is that something about the culture that we've had here in council? Just following on from that, I support the help towards revitalising the city centre. K Road has got its own culture, Britomart has its own culture, the Wynyard Quarter and the Viaduct also have their own culture, so we need to do our part to rebuild Queen Street back up. And the only other note that I wanted to make is the comments about philanthropy, whether there can be a recommendation that we have someone working on philanthropy in the Mayor's office. So, kia ora.
We've got one for the road, and then I'm going to show you just what it's like inside. I've got pictures there, and well, mate, when you see it, the chances of this working out financially well.
Your worship. On the list.
I'm glad you're putting your money into it, Councillor. You're not getting in mine. Councillor Fuller.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Look, I accept that this is a decision that is locked and loaded, as Councillor Williamson said, and it's about just recommitting to a commitment that was made by previous council in 2016 to this work, and I accept also that it is an eyesore, and I am old enough to remember when it wasn't, you know, back in its glory days when I was very young with my family and went down and you know, was at the theatre. But I have to say that I do share the concerns that His Worship has talked about. I do believe we have to be good stewards of ratepayer money. And it is a lot of money, $15 million of ratepayer funds going to a privately owned property, $15 million of taxpayer money going to a privately owned property. For an industry that is well heeled or, you know, well funded. So I do, surprisingly, also agree with the strong sentiments shared by my fellow South Auckland councillor, Councillor Williamson. I don't think many of my constituents will be heading out in this day and age to see or to use the building. So I do want to make sure that we do lock in some community benefit and community usage if we get this across the line. And I'm pretty confident it's going to get across the line. But I'm sitting on the fence in terms of where I'll vote, more as a show of my own, you know, of a reflection of what my community, how my community would want me to vote on something like this. And I'm really mindful because in the last few months, I've been virtually begging our staff to try and find a measly $200,000 to get our Ngāti o Taramarae build across the line, a build that we've been working on for over a decade in my local board area. And I think the full amount is only about maybe under 3 million is what they've been able to source, you know, from us as well as from other funders. And when I compare that to this, it just, yeah, it does make my stomach turn a little bit. That we should be making decisions for all of Auckland, including areas like mine out in the Manukau ward. But I agree with the strong sentiment shared by Councillor Williamson. I agree that if this will pass, I'm sure, that we have to really hold real strong accountability to this to make sure that we don't have that rubber band effect that we've seen so often in this place, where we start with 15 million and then it ends up being 30 or 40 or 50 million down the track. So I'll think about where I'll vote as we hear the next speaker, but yeah, kia ora. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bartley, then I want to show the pictures.
Okay, thank you, Your
Well,
Worship.
unless you want to see them now.
Yeah, I
Put
don't
them
mind.
up, she doesn't mind. Right. For those of you worried about the rotting floor, that went a while ago. There's Gaza. This is just where the bomb hit from the Israeli attack.
Point of order,
No, it's not
point of
quite.
order, Your Worship.
Eh?
Point of order, Your Worship, respectfully, and I get your passion, your great frustration with this item, but I think that we're all entitled, if we wish to have one contribution each. I totally get it, how you feel about this, but I think, to be honest, you're having multiple contributions in this debate. I think we should hear from those people who haven't spoken, and then we should put it to the vote.
Rightio. Well, I won't speak. I was just showing those. Councillor Bartley, anyhow.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Everything Councillor Williamson said, I agreed with. It resonated with me. And then also hearing from the staff, from Noel, hearing about the heritage. I'm a strong believer in order to go forward, we need to look back, and heritage plays an important part of that. I can see the beauty that the city has with these heritage buildings, the town hall, the civic, and so it does look like we have an opportunity to hopefully keep another one and restore it. But I do have major concerns about the owner. It seems like we can give 15 million and the owner hasn't even come here, or I've never seen the owner. Like, can we trust them? You're the owner? Oh, okay. Oh, that changes my mind then. Oh, good. Yeah, but okay. And then I agree with a lot of what the mayor says about putting this money to a private property, and we had Avondale community come here and ask us for help. Like, we got lots of communities that need help for less than 15 million. So yeah, I don't know. I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's everybody, so I'm going to put it now. You want to see the photo?
He doesn't. No. Just put it to the vote.
Okay. Well, no, I don't want to. You don't want to make it on the informed choice.
A division.
I'm going to put it.
They want division.
Somebody wanted a division?
Yeah.
Well, that's a surprise, isn't it? Eh?
Councillor Baker.
4.
Councillor Bartley.
4.
Councillor Darby.
4.
Councillor Ferry. 4. Councillor Filipina.
Aye.
Councillor Fletcher.
Yes.
Councillor Foley.
Against.
Councillor Henderson.
Yes.
Councillor Hills.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Lee. 4. Councillor Leone.
4.
Councillor Newman.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Simpson.
Definitely 4.
Councillor Stewart.
Against.
Councillor Turner.
Against.
Councillor Walker.
Absolutely positively Auckland.
Yes.
Councillor Watson.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Right.
Mayor Brown.
Reluctantly 4.
So that's carried, and it's 15 votes to 4.
Okay. There is a chance we might finish today. Thank you very much. The gentleman's attention at the back there. There is just a procedural one at number 16. If somebody wants to move that, probably somebody did. Councillor Newman, thank you. And it was seconded by Councillor Baker. All those in favour, please say aye. Now clear the room because
Now you've got to move to go into confidential.
I'm going to move to go into confidential.
Point of order, do
and
we
it's
even
been
have
seconded
quorum right
by
now?
Baker, and all those in favour, please say aye. Okay. And return to the pink papers I lost about an hour ago. Where the fuck are they?
And you have to adjourn now.